My name is John McLinden and I am a Senior Dynamics Consultant here at Microchannel. Over the next 20 to 30 minutes I look forward to taking you through an introduction to the exciting new Microsoft Dynamics AX release. The demonstration will consist mainly of two parts. First, I would like to introduce you to the new AX and its innovative browser-based user interface. As part of the session, as well as taking a look at the interface, we will also review some of the latest functionality. We'll take a look at how the new AX integrates into the Microsoft product stack, with particular emphasis on Excel. In addition, we will take a look at some of the global functionality that is available in the new release. Following on from our overview of the interface and global features, we will take a deeper look at one of the business process flows. For the purpose of the webinar, we will take a look at the procure-to-pay process. That is, purchase orders from the creation of a vendor to invoice payment. So, by way of an introduction, the new AX has been designed and released for global organizations and global rollouts. It facilitates multi-site operations using shared master data and business processes. It possesses country and regional specific capabilities in a single system instance. The new AX has a rich ERP functionality, as did its predecessors, across a number of business unit areas, including human resource, financials, project management, procurement, sales and marketing, and production. As I mentioned earlier, we will take a look at the procurement side of AX a little later. So let's get straight into the application and take a look at the new interface and some of its rich functionality. So the first design difference you will notice from previous AX releases is that the interface is purely browser-based and is driven by a new concept called Workspaces. Let's begin by taking a look at the Workspaces in a little more detail. For this session we'll take a look at the production floor management workspace. So let's fire that up. Okay, so workspaces are highly configurable and will lend themselves to increased productivity for allowing a 360-degree view of business activities within a business area. They are designed to help answer specific and common business queries. They allow the user to work and manage by exception. They give insight by comparing multiple data sources. They allow for much improved navigation by reducing data filtering and data mining efforts. And of course they give direct access to tasks. So let's review the workspace functionality by reviewing effectively the functionality from left to right. So the first thing that you'll pick up on is the introduction of a lot of graphical interface into the new AX look and feel. There has been the introduction of what we term interactive tiles. In this particular workspace there are two, which are planned absences, which touch on the HR module, but also production orders to release, which we have a number of 7. So I mentioned that it allowed to manage by exception. So for example, if I select the tile production orders to release, then in a few moments it will drill down and filter that data and give me the production orders that are ready to go. The tiles, as I mentioned, are configurable to the user requirements and to the workspace requirements, and they can be refreshed on a frequency based upon user definition. What I mean by this is if I look at the icon at the top right hand corner of our tile and just click on it, we can see that this queue, this statistic, last updated. So, as I say, depending on the volatility of the data, we can change the frequency of each of the tiles and create new tiles within AX. Or we can quite simply say, begin update now, in which case that has actually updated it. So quite an efficient way of data mining and working by exception. If I now draw your attention to the center of the screen and effectively the working panel, we can see that the initial view is the jobs to complete for production. A number of powerful tooltips have been added to the new AX. So for example, if I hover over the item number, then we get an image pop-up and some data which can be configured for that particular link. And of course, as with other AX options, other AX instances and prior versions, we could quite simply click on a link and be taken down that link to the parent data. So to change the focus of the central panel, we have some tabs down the left. In this case, to manage by exception, I might click on jobs with deviation. and I can instantly see and very quickly see that I have 3 production orders in the system where we have issues and where we have deviations. The first 2 are deviations by quantity, and the last one is a deviation by consumption, 40% raw material consumption. So in a single point we can actually action these exceptions. So I could quite simply accept that the deviation is acceptable, or I can highlight one of the production orders and take a look very, very quickly by clicking on the journals link to see exactly what's gone on with that particular production order. And of course from this point I can create new journals to take corrective action against that particular journal. Other facilities, I mentioned HR. HR is entwined throughout the new AX. I could take a look at the team to see who's currently working on this particular production order. In this case we've got Bill, Dana and Dan. And I can drill down, should I wish to, into their capabilities, their resources, and as I'll show you in a moment I can look at their absences and the amount of time they're booking towards jobs so that we can start to analyse things like deviations based upon time. So if I just drop back at the moment to jobs to complete, we can scroll slightly to the right of this workspace, and the next feature we'll take a brief look at is the links. The links in the system are basically links to data and supporting data and processes around this particular workspace. So we could take a look at all production orders, we could take a look at subcontracted work orders for any work that's been pushed out to another manufacturer or another vendor. We can review our resources and resource groups and work out capabilities and bottlenecks. And of course we can generate journals such as picking lists, route cards, job cards from this single point and from this single workspace. And again, as mentioned, HR is tied in quite heavily to this version of AX. So for this particular production order, I can very, very quickly click on the approve link at the bottom of the screen, and that will take me straight into any time that's been registered for the job, and basically I can see what Bill's been up to, and should I wish to I can either reject or I can accept his timesheet data. Okay, so let's close that. So that very, very briefly is a look at the workspaces. There are a number of workspaces out of the box, and as I say, we can create new ones, and we can actually adjust and amend and configure the existing workspaces. So what I'd like to do now is give you a brief look at the rest of the interface with a couple of navigation tools that have been incorporated into the new AX, and then take a look at the close integration of Excel. So firstly, if we click on the toolbar at the top, you'll notice that the prior AX navigation tools and menu systems are all in place and still exist. But what's been added to AX, the new AX, which is quite exciting, is the ability to search for pages. So if I draw your attention to the top of the screen, there is a predictive text box for searching for pages. So without navigating the menu, I could quite simply sort of say I wish to look at all the customers. So as I start to type all customers, it narrows down the search for me so that I can actually look and say, well, yep, there's all the customers. I'll click on that, and it should take me to my customer maintenance and review of all the customers. So while we're actually in the customer list, I touched very briefly on the integration points with Excel and with the rest of the Office product suite. So what I'd like to do now is to show you how that we can export to Excel as we could in prior versions of AX, but also how we can make amendments outside of the system and then actually publish those back. So if I select the Office icon and elect to export my customers to Excel, I can now open the worksheet, enable editing, and this will just take a few moments, and in a moment, because I'm drawing the data out of AX, it will basically ask me to re-log on, and there it is. So I just need to re-authenticate my login, which I'll just do now. And if we just give it a moment, it's extracting data, it's verifying my authentication and retrieving any registrations, as well as metadata that will support the actual customer master records. So if we just give it a moment. And as you can see, I now have all of my customers extracted into a worksheet. So I can carry out any kind of operations which are validated within this worksheet. So for example, we have Sunset Wholesalers, which are currently in customer group 10. I might wish to change that to customer group 30, so I can change it in Excel. And then very simply, clicking on Publish, I can send those changes back and resync them with AX. So it says it's been successful, so let's see if it has been. I'll close the workbook down. I won't save the workbook on this occasion. And you'll note that Sunset Wholesalers is still set as customer group 10. But when I actually refresh the screen, it's now changed to 30. So that demonstrates the power of how we can export into Excel and into other parts of the Microsoft product stack, make amendments, and then carry them back into the system. Another powerful feature I wanted to touch on with regards to the data is the ability to bring data into the system from web services. And so for this part of the demonstration, I'll show you how we can import currencies and exchange rates very, very simply. So if I navigate to the General Ledger and just click on General Ledger and Currencies and go to my Import Currency Exchange Rates, then you'll note that I've just got the one exchange rate provider set up at the moment, which is the Central Bank of Europe. So we'll log directly into there, and by simply clicking OK, I've set my exchange rate type to defaults. I have a message in my toolbar to let me know that 31 exchange rates have been imported directly from the Central Bank of Europe. And to take a look at that, we'll use perhaps our search bar to go and look for exchange rates. So type in exchange, predictive. Let's take a look at the currency exchange rates. And as we can see at the bottom, the latest exchange rate has been pulled in. Okay, that concludes the very, very brief overview and look of the system and of some of the integration touch points that we have. What I'd like to do now for the remainder of the session is to actually drop through one of the business process flows. So let's drill down to one of the key business processes. In this case, as mentioned before, we will look at the procure-to-pay process from end to end. So the steps we'll look to do are the creation of a new vendor or supplier. We'll create a purchase order. We'll receive the purchase order, generate a purchase invoice, and then we'll go into the accounts payable module and generate a payment for that vendor. So firstly, let's create a vendor. To do that, there are a number of places, but for the purpose of this webinar, we'll just drop into the accounts payable module. We'll look at our vendors, and we'll fire up our vendor maintenance. We could, in the search list, just put all vendors, and it would have taken us there as well. So we'll click on the new button on the toolbar. And you'll note that I'm actually keying the vendor account. This is because we haven't got the automatic numbering of the accounts switched on for this particular webinar. But as with all prior versions of AX, we could put number sequences in place to actually generate automatic numbering for pretty much anything. So we'll set up a code. We'll give it a name. You will note that as I start to type the name in, there's predictive text throughout the system. So I'm actually started to type ACME, A-C-M-E, and what that's done is gone off to find any other vendors that may have the same name, which is just a way of sort of tracking to see if we're duplicating data. So in this case, we won't. I need to give it a group, which is mandatory. So we'll make it a parts vendor. And the last bit of information I'll enter against it is some financial information, some payment information. We'll leave the terms of payment as net 30, but we need to specify a method of payment if we're to pay the vendor later. So for this example, I'll just select check, and I'll save that record away. So vendor created very, very simply, very straightforward. Next step would be to raise the purchase order against that supplier, against that vendor. Now there are several ways we could do that. We could go into the purchase order module, we could go to procurement, we could search for it through the search bar, or what we could do is just simply click on the procurement ribbon within the vendors, and that gives me all of the actions available. So I'll create a new purchase order for that supplier. And what you will notice is it's taking me straight into the purchase order lines to enter an item number. And the reason for that is that because I came from the vendor record, it already knew all of the default values for that vendor to be able to actually set up the purchase order header for me. So let's enter a product. Again, it's predictive. So we'll key a product in. Again, if we hover over the item, we should get a picture, an image of the item and some general data. I just hope that image isn't indicative of your experience with the new AX so far. So what we'll do now is just scroll through the defaults. We have a default site, a default warehouse, and a quantity. So I'll enter a quantity, in this case of 2, and of course unit of measure and a default unit price. So if I click on save, our purchase order is saved away. So I guess the next step really is to actually confirm that purchase order. So I'll click on the Purchase tab. You will note that, as with AX12 and prior versions, the business logic tends to follow a left to right path across the tabs and sub-tabs, and that is the same in the new AX, which makes it very intuitive to new and existing users. So let's confirm that purchase order. So I'll generate a confirmation. As with those familiar with AX12 and before that, we have the option to post or not post. In other words, generate a pro forma purchase order. But in this case, I will post it. I will print it to the screen so that you can get a look at what the standard documentation looks like. And we'll just click on OK. So I'm sending it to the screen, I'm not emailing it, but of course we have the document center and document management handling to distribute the documents, the commercial documents where we see fit. So if we take a moment, that will generate a purchase order. So just thinking about it. So there we go. We've got our purchase order for a quantity of 2 Acme rockets with the site and the warehouse that they're to be delivered to. So I'll just close that purchase order down. And you'll note that the order is now at a status of confirmed. Next step in the life cycle of this purchase order will be for us to receive the goods. So what we'll do is just click on receive, and we'll do a product receipt. Again, we can post or not post, and hence go into pro forma. For the purpose of this webinar, I shan't print out every document, so I shan't be printing off the product receipt. But of course, I do need to enter a product receipt reference, which I'll do now. And I'll just click on OK. So that's processing, and you'll note that the purchase order has now changed to a status of received. So the penultimate step would be to generate the purchase invoice. So again, working our way along the ribbon, I'll select the invoice, generate invoice, and again there's some details that we need to enter, so we can give it a description, we can enter our invoice identification number, and one thing I would draw your attention to is that the match status is currently set to not performed, so it's not actually been matched to any of the orders. So if I was to try and post this invoice, it should error. And as you can see, the status bar's turned pink and given me basically an error message saying you haven't matched it, which would give us a couple of opportunities here. We can either go into match product receipts, which I'll fire up now, and we can select which receipts we're actually creating the invoice for. Or if we want to just change the status, so it might be a large value and it's only a small discrepancy which we're prepared to accept, we can simply say update match status, and it's now changed to passed which means that we should be able to quite simply post that purchase invoice away. And it's been successful, and you'll note that we have now got a status of invoiced. Okay, so the final step on the purchase order will be to pay the vendor, pay the supplier. So again, we'll just drop into the accounts payable module. We'll select payments, and to conclude the process, we'll just generate a very simple payment journal. So if I select payment journal, I elect to create a new journal. I first must give it a journal name. What kind of journal is it? So it's a vendor payment that I'm processing. And once that's created, to get into the lines, into the details of the journal, we very simply just click on the journal batch link. And in a few seconds, we should be allowed to enter it. So first thing I need to enter is the account which I'm about to pay. So we enter our account, Acme Rockets in this case, and now I'm in a position where I can start to do my settlement. So very simply, we click on settlement. We can see our invoices that are applicable. So in this case, there's only the one that we just created, so I'll select that and click OK. You'll note that the debit amount's been pulled through. So the next thing for me to do is to post this journal. Should take just a moment. So that's posted. I have a notification to say that's been the case. And finally, I can generate payments. So for this particular journal, I'll select Generate Payments. You'll note that it's defaulted to check, which was what we've set up against that particular vendor at the beginning of the process. I can click on OK. I can check the bank account and click OK again. That'll take a moment or two, but that will then generate a check, and I should get notification in my information bar at the top of the screen that that has been successful. We've paid the vendor for our Acme Rockets, and yep, that concludes the process. So that concludes the run through of the purchase orders, and also the very brief introduction to AX, look and feel, and user interface.